Lunala just won its first tournament in 3 years. The Vancouver Regional Championships were this previous weekend, and with it being one of the later Regulation G tournaments, it felt as though we knew what to expect in Top Cut. But the format just keeps throwing us curveballs. Lunala, who was widely considered to not be at the level to win a regional level tournament, just won its first regional level event since 2022. Regulation G is a single restricted legendary format, and the last time it won an event, players are able to run it alongside a second legendary Pokemon. While most players believe Lunala was a fine restricted to run, the common sentiment was that it just isn't capable of winning a regional level event without a second restricted at its side, especially considering just how powerful the top restricted Pokemon are in comparison. But at the Vancouver Regional Championships, Behzad Muntazir proved everyone wrong by winning the event with the Power Herb Meteor Beam Lunala team. Today, let's take a look at how Lunala was able to beat the odds. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video at any point in time, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. As a matter of fact, you should really just subscribe right now because I have a playlist full of content just like this that you can watch once this video ends. And if you think you're subscribed, do me a favor and double check because a lot of my viewers actually aren't. With that, let's get into the video. But not before I plug my YouTube channel memberships. If you click the join button, not only do you get access to bonus videos every week and access to my podcast with Jody Azzarelli, but you also can join my members only Discord where we team build and discuss Pokemon broadly. You also get a badge by your name in the comments and in my live streams, and you get to see your name at the end of these videos. Lots of cool perks there, so consider supporting me with the channel membership. Now back to the video. Since it was introduced in Generation 7, Lunala has always been a pretty decent pick for a restricted legendary slot due to its access to its incredible bulk, its great ability, and its access to important tools like Wide Guard, Trick Room, and even Tailwind. However, it's only really seen success when it was able to be paired with a second restricted legendary Pokemon. This is because while Lunala has access to some pretty powerful moves like Power Herb Meteor Beam, Expanding Force, and its signature move of Moongeist Beam, its immediate damage output is nowhere near the level of Calyrex Shadow Rider, Calyrex Ice Rider, Groudon, Kyogre, Zacian, or the Bikes. What it does best is support one of these stronger restricted legendaries while covering for some of their weaknesses. For example, it won a regional in 2019 where it would psych up a partner Xerneas after they went for Geomancy and sweeping alongside it, or in 2022 where it would set up Trick Room for partner Groudon while having Wide Guard or Moongeist Beam to scare off opposing Calyrex Shadow Riders. The point is, Lunala has never really been the star of the team due to its niche being that it keeps the partner restricted safe more than anything. This isn't to say Lunala can't get work done in single restricted, it just hasn't seen nearly the same level of success or consistency as Pokemon like Miraidon or Calyrex. Its negative matchups into common Pokemon like Incineroar also don't help its case, but a recent meta shakeup could have helped it out. The Vancouver Regional Championships happened just last weekend, and it was coming off the heels of another underdog restricted finally winning EUIC. Koraidon won the event being piloted by Wolf Glick on a Parastrap team. A Pokemon like Koraidon winning an event like this will ultimately lead to the Pokemon being used more often for the coming weeks and having Pokemon with negative or positive matchups into it seeing decreases and increases in usage respectively. Effectively, the metagame receives a little bit of a shakeup with players adjusting their calls for upcoming tournaments accordingly. And this shakeup was pretty visible in the top cut of the event, where we see 6 different restricted legendary Pokemon in top 8. A really impressive spread of Pokemon considering just how far into the format we are. Going into this event, some of the Pokemon to watch were Koraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider considering their recent success. Behzad ran a team consisting of Lunala, Ogerpon Hearthflame, Landorus Incarnate, Indeedee Female, Urshifu Rapid Strike, and Roaring Moon. Typical Lunala teams will run Wide Guard on it as one of their moves because it allows for Lunala to protect itself from Calyrex Shadow Rider's Astral Barrage, which is capable of one-shotting Lunala even through Shadow Shield. Keep in mind, Shadow Shield cuts the damage that Lunala takes in half when it's at full health, so that's a pretty impressive amount of damage that Calyrex is able to do into it. However, Behzad dropped Wide Guard on Lunala since Roaring Moon is able to pressure Calyrex Shadow Rider with Knockoff, threatening a one-shot. Tailwind and Trick Room on the same team allows for Lunala to almost always be in an advantageous position against Calyrex, since against faster teams, Trick Room on Lunala will allow for it to strike first, and Tailwind is useful against the slower, more balance-oriented Calyrex teams to allow for Lunala to outspeed and one-shot them. Power Herb Meteor Beam also allows for Lunala to not only boost its special attack stat to +1 before spamming Expanding Force against the rest of the team, but it gives Lunala an option to remove Incineroar from the game in a single turn, a Pokemon which has historically been a huge barrier for Lunala to do well. Lunala also does fairly decently into Koraidon, since Koraidon isn't able to use Close Combat or Collision Course into it since Lunala is a Ghost type. Lunala also has access to Expanding Force to threaten the one-shot, and at +1 with Psychic Terrain, it isn't something that Koraidon wants to switch in on even if it's terrestrialized into a Fire type. Behzad managed to take down a hard Trick Room Calyrex Ice team piloted by Alejandro Terrazas in the finals, cementing their Lunala team as the first one to go the distance in Generation 9 VGC. Congratulations to Bizod on their incredible victory. Now, let's take a look at the tournament and see just how much this metagame got shaken up. All right, let's talk about the Vancouver Regional Championships. Before we start, first of all, shout out to Bizod Muntazir for winning with Lunala. That's the first win Lunala's gotten in Generation 9. Now, I mentioned this in the intro, how Lunala just hasn't really seen that same level of success, and there's a good reason for it. There's also a good reason why it's finally winning this specific event, and it's just because of everything that kind of changed in the past couple of weeks. It's a really interesting call on the metagame, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so Bizod ended up winning the event. Their team was really cool. They had Power Herb, Meteor Beam, Terra Water, Lunala. And the reason this is kind of a genius call in the metagame right now is because some of the top Pokemon in the metagame are, of course, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Calyrex Ice Rider. Koraidon is like questionable. It's just currently up, right? Miraidon is like undoubtedly still probably #1. But Lunala has really cool tech into that. Shadow Shield allows for Lunala to just live any one single hit other than like, you know, Astral Barrage. And even then, if it's not Life Orb, it's going to probably tank the Astral Barrage since it's spread and cut in half at full health. But this means that Lunala is one of the more safe Pokemon to get Trick Room off with, especially with Indeedee next to it. It allows you to position yourself super well into like these Balance C teams. You know, you see your Amoonguss, Incineroar, Calyrex Ice teams. You see your like hyper offensive Koraidon teams. Lunala is going to be able to tank like a single hit. You follow me with the Indeedee, you get the Trick Room off, and now Lunala gets to play the game. So Meteor Beam lets it mostly one-shot Incineroar because it's, you know, super effective and at +1. And then from that point on, it is just standard. You're under Trick Room. You're the fastest thing in the field. You Helping Hand, you follow me, you spam Expanding Force. That's just like the name of the game. But it's the Roaring Moon that's like a really cool call. Typically with Lunala, it is like Tail Room. There aren't a lot of hard Trick Room Lunalas. They just like having Trick Room as an option since it has access to the move and it's able to position a lot better. That way it's always able to like find a comfortable speed tier in a match. But having Roaring Moon be your Tailwind setter is really cool because a lot of teams will opt for Pokemon like Tornadus, but Roaring Moon covers for Lunala so well since it's able to switch in on everything Incineroar wants to go for, since it has access to Terrifying Acrobatics to probably not one-shot, but deal really significant damage to opposing Rillaboom, which are really annoying for Lunala since it's going to get rid of your Psychic Terrain, and it's just able to like U-turn and pivot all over the place. It just scares them off quite a bit. But one of the bigger things is that knockoff is going to allow you to threaten opposing Calyrex Shadow Riders. Even Ice Rider doesn't like taking the knockoff since you're going to get rid of their item and deal a good amount of damage if they don't Terra. And Lunala just having Terra Water also into Ice Rider is really cool since you're going to just wall it out. It doesn't deal enough damage to you with high horsepower. You start to resist the Glacial Lance, which allows for you to more easily like pin them down with Moongeist Beam or Meteor Beam. And you force them to Terra in a lot of situations. You have 2 super effective moves into them and they don't want to take either of those. So that's like really genius. Taunt Urshifu obviously is picking up, you know, that Aqua Jet isn't getting you as much value on a Psychic Terrain team. But one of the cooler things with like Lunala and Indeedee is like into Miraidon. Since Miraidon is not going to have terrain control that turn 1, they're basically forced to Volt Switch or even just not lead into you, which means that Lunala is not going to be as threatened by that just absurd amount of damage that it's capable of. Oh. I thought I paused the recording. Anyways, it's not going to be threatened by like that absurd amount of damage that Specs Miraidon is capable of. And even if it is, even if they do manage to get that terrain up, you're going to live it because you just take half damage and you're like a Pokemon with 137 HP and 107 special defense. Everything else around here is just basically like, it's just basically like gravy, right? Like Landorus is able to position, like we see these 3 like do super well. These 4 even do super well in tournaments together. Roaring Moon, Urshifu, Landorus, Ogerpon, Hearthflame. I'm pretty sure they were all on Justin Tang's team that won San Antonio Regionals. But this is really awesome. Alluring Voice is also really cool tech for Indeedee since it's a single target fairy move. It's going to be dealing a lot more damage than Dazzling Gleam would. Indeedee isn't known for its offenses, but having access to that move is really cool, especially since Alluring Voice will confuse any Pokemon that had its stats raised before you hit it with it. So like, let's say hypothetically that you're facing off against a Calyrex Ice, and the Calyrex Ice manages to KO your Landorus with Glacial Lance. Well, now then Indeedee will be able to go for the Alluring Voice into the Calyrex Ice, and not only did Calyrex Ice get confused, but at +1, it's going to deal a pretty hefty amount of damage to itself with the confusion if it hits itself. So this team is just super cool. I really love the call into the metagame, and especially into a Koraidon, especially after like Koraidon went EUIC, this Pokemon is just in such a good spot in the metagame right now, even as a single restricted, even without wide guard. It's just a really phenomenal call, and I'm just super, super glad that one of my favorites managed to win a regional. Next up, I'm not sure if we've seen Hard Trick Room go this far in a tournament in a very long time. Hard Trick Room has a reputation in competitive Pokemon. If you don't know what Hard Trick Room is, if you're like new to the scene, it's effectively you're getting off Trick Room and you're either winning in 4 turns or losing in 5. That is kind of like the essence of Hard Trick Room, and this is the hardest Trick Room I have seen in a minute. Hatterene and Indeedee are like the face of this, but like Calyrex Ice and competitive in Regulation G is also known for this. Typically, though, you tend to see like Ursaluna or Ursaluna regular, Ursaluna Blood Moon next to like Dawnwing's Necrozma, which is, you know, it's kind of like Lunala. We could have seen the mirror match, but Calyrex Ice is very strong for this. You have access to some really cool Pokemon here. Terragrass, Fake Out, Decorate, Smeargle is really awesome because it allows for you to usually underspeed your Calyrex Ice and go for that Decorate into it. There are even some Smeargle that will actually run like Eject Pack and Moody because it allows for you to Fake Out, get off your Trick Room, and immediately pivot into like a Choice Specs Torkoal, and Choice Specs Torkoal is so threatening. Upper Hand on the Gallade is also a really cool call because it allows for you to block certain Pokemon's Fake Outs. Not all of them, obviously, you have to be faster than them, but since Gallade is so fast, it's able to deal with that super well. Gallade is also usually running Wide Guard, and I think it's really cool that neither of the teams that made finals had a Wide Guard in this event, which is just going to show that maybe Calyrex Shadow Rider is a little bit of a fraud at the moment. We like to put things on Fraud Watch on this channel. Calyrex Shadow Rider has not won a single major since Regulation G came back. Obviously, it's won majors before Regulation G came back when it was like in the first run. But Lunala winning before Calyrex Shadow Rider and no wide guard in either teams. I don't know about that. I don't know. But yeah, this team just wants to get up Trick Room. It goes for it just goes for as much damage as it can. You're trying to like snowball as quickly as possible, and that Decorate is just evidence of that. And of course, Choice Specs Terrifier Torkoal is like a staple of these Hard Trick Room teams, since you're going to be underspeeding the Amoonguss, which are normally able to underspeed your Calyrex Ice Rider and put you to sleep. But Hatterene is also another Pokemon that underspeeds that, and that's just super, super cool. But yeah, Sacred Sword also like really good into Pokemon that, let's say that like you lose your Torkoal early on in the match. Sacred Sword ignoring the defenses of Zamazenta make the matchup a lot easier, since Calyrex Ice Rider does not enjoy the Zamazenta matchup one bit. So shout out to Alejandro Terrazas. That's really cool. Shout out Mexico. Love you guys. Anyways, we do see a really interesting spread of restricteds in our top 8. Like I said, there were 6 restricteds in the top 8, which is a really impressive amount of diversity. So we see Lunala as our first, Calyrex Ice Rider as our second, Miraidon as our third, Terapagos as our fourth, Calyrex Shadow Rider as our fifth, and then we have Koraidon as our sixth. Now, Koraidon isn't actually running Perish on this team, and that's to be expected. Wolf is basically the only dude that can like run Perish and do so well with it, because he's just like gotten so many reps into it and he's like super familiar with it. We see Giovanni actually, old viewer of the channel. I used to talk to this guy quite a bit, but this is a team that we've seen before at like the start of Regulation G Part 2. I believe it was Luca Paz ran this team pretty early on, and it was super reliable. We don't see basically any adjustment to this team. It's basically identical to what we saw before, but Koraidon is just like in a better position in the metagame right now, since we did see a little bit of an influx of like Terapagos and a drop off of Pokemon like Zamazenta. It's not that Zamazenta is like a bad matchup into Koraidon. It's just that like one mistake, like losing a key Pokemon like your Chi-Yu or your Fluttermane, could make it so like a Terra Dragon Zamazenta is just very difficult to deal with. But this is just like proto spam stuff. It's very, very iconic on Zama teams. Terapagos. Here's another reason that Lunala is like really cool right now. Terapagos basically don't run coverage anymore. We see a lot of sub Terapagos. This one is a Specs Terapagos, obviously, but like other Terapagos, some of the more popular ones are like Calm Mind, Substitute, Single Terra, Starstorm, like Protect stuff, which means that if you don't Terra with your Lunala, you basically just wall it. But yeah, This team is pretty cool. Choice Specs Terapagos is usually ran next to Chi-Yu Fluttermane and other like super offensive Pokemon. And while this team isn't lacking offense, it is really cool to see neither Chi-Yu nor Fluttermane on this team. Sheer Force, Life Orb, Landorus. Obviously, we have like Light Screen, Tailwind, and Encore on the Whimsicott for support. We have Ogerpod Hearthflame, one of the best partners for Terapagos since it's able to redirect moves into it, especially that Amoonguss. It's preventing Spore on itself and its partner. And we have Farigiraf to prevent fake outs and make it easier for Terapagos to get its moves off, and also Helping Hand. Like that Choice Spec single target Terra Starstorm before Terra hits a lot harder than you would expect it to. In fact, it hits harder than after you Terra, if you don't know, since it is that single target move. It's not getting cut in damage. But yeah, this team is very interesting. Alex has made like this is like a really deep run, so I shout out to them. They're a phenomenal player who has been working for it for quite a while. What else do we see? We see this team, Miraidon. It isn't a Rubega, but it's kind of similar. I mean, you have Ursaluna on the team instead of like an Iron Hands, and there's no Ogerpon Hearthflame, but it's like the same sort of idea. It's Choice Specs Terra Fairy and Miraidon with as many Pokemon enabling it as possible. And you have like that soft Trick Room option with the Ursaluna and the Electric Seed for Farigiraf, allowing for you to position a lot better into opposing Pokemon. U-Turn on Incineroar with Assault Vest is a really cool call right now, considering how powerful Miraidon is. That Assault Vest will allow for the Incineroar usually to take the single target Electro Drift, meaning that you're in a better position against them. And obviously Ursaluna is a really good call right now, considering that it's just like really solid into a majority of restricteds. If that Trick Room goes up, Ursaluna becomes a restricted. Like it just hits way too hard. And yeah, we did see a lot of Incineroar this tournament, which it's not to say that Incineroar isn't super common in VGC. It's like the best non-restricted that isn't like a legendary. But it is interesting seeing how many Incineroar are in this top cut after, you know, the big spike of Koraidon stuff going on. We see Abdullah Sempra, one of the best players in the world right now, running this Heatran team that Heatran and like Terapagos are like a really cool combo right now, because Terapagos doesn't like the matchup into Koraidon, nor does it like the matchup into Zamazenta, and those are the two biggest problem matchups for it, because they just hit it for super effective and there isn't much it can do other than rely on its partners to deal with it. And Heatran is sort of like a one Pokemon answer to both of those. You don't care about Flare Blitz because you are a Flash Fire Pokemon. You only have your Magma Storm powered up by that. But also you don't care about Collision Course because you Terra Fairy. And it's the same deal into Zamazenta. A lot of them run like Heavy Slam, and because Heatran is such a heavy Pokemon, it doesn't deal that much damage with the Terra Fairy. And since Zamazenta doesn't run a ton of attack, it relies on its defense to deal damage with Body Press. That allows for Heatran to just sit in front of it. It allows for it to Magma Storm in the Pokemon, prevent them from switching, and then just deal significant damage with partner Pokemon like Rillaboom, like Ogerpon Cornerstone, and, you know, of course, that Magma Storm is going to hurt. Heavy Slam is also a really funny move that I always have to explain in these videos on Heatran. Why is Heatran running a physical Steel-type move? Well, it's very simple. Heatran can't one-shot Fluttermane or Screamtail without Heavy Slam. Heavy Slam, you know, it deals like 120 base power damage. It's a physical attack into these two Pokemon who would much rather be hit on their special side. So, or at least Fluttermane in particular. Fluttermane is like really annoying in like every metagame ever. So that's really cool for Heatran. Let's take a look at some of the broader results. Oh yeah, James Beck made it really far with Mienshao. Mienshao is a Pokemon we haven't seen a lot of recently, but it is in a pretty good spot right now. Being able to have a Pokemon that improves Calyrex Shadow Rider's matchup into Calyrex Ice Rider and Kyogre when like Trick Room is up or if they outspeed you is really cool. Being able to go for that Wide Guard and being able to take the Taunt off of the Urshifu and put it onto this Pokemon allows for more flexibility in matchups. And one of the coolest things about this team was that the Urshifu was apparently Choice Scarf Rain Dance. I don't know if we ever saw it in the matches, but that's really cool tech into Koraidon because it allows for you to kind of wall it out. It gets rid of the Orichalcum boost, and it also gets rid of, you know, it just has the damage of fire moves. So while Calyrex Shadow Rider doesn't mind that matchup at all, really, because you're going to outspeed it and psychic it, it does allow for you to better position against like these Sun teams that can become an issue into this sort of thing, since a lot of these Pokemon actually don't like dealing with Koraidon other than the Calyrex, so that is really cool. Also like Terrifier, you know, you get the sun up, or you get like the rain up, now you just straight up wall that thing. That is awesome. Shout out to them. Shout out to James Beck. And yeah, some other cool stuff that happened in this tournament is Wo Chen did make a pretty deep run. This is the team, it's similar to the team that we saw, the Tangs run at NAIC with the fast Wo Chen. Sorry, I'm a little sick still. With the fast Wo Chen and the slower Kyogre. It's a Combine Kyogre with leftovers. Obviously, Pollen Puff is going to allow for you to heal the Kyogre up. Decrease the incoming damage, and you know we have the support with the Light Clay. But the really cool thing about this is that the Wo Chen is actually running Leaf Storm and Leech Seed. I don't know how I feel about Leech Seed in this format. I've always been like a Leech Seed denier in Regulation G. I feel like Ruination gets you a lot more value, but triple Grass type Kyogre is really cool. Grass types aren't nearly as scared with the rain up. Obviously, you have to fear the Bleak Wind Storm, but the team has ways around that. You know, Light Screen, Terrestrialization, Fake Outs, being able to prevent that damage. But, you know, we do see a very deep run by Wo Chen and by a fellow Mexican. Shout out Mexicans for Wo Chen. That is our Wo Chen Super Pack. And what else is kind of interesting here? We see Zamazenta with like a Ditto. Jose Mana ran this team. We see, yeah, Ting Lu Zamazenta is a really interesting combination, especially on this sort of team. Typically, the restricted, or not the restricted, the Ruination Pokemon, the Treasure of Ruin that you run with Zamazenta is Chen Pao, because Chen Pao allows for you to increase the damage with Body Press. It doesn't decrease it since you're switching it to be your attack stat for that turn. But Ting Lu is cool because this allows for you to just trap in Pokemon, especially with Screamtail. Ooh, that seems really annoying. Sand Tombing them in, going for Disable and Encore, making them just hate their life. Ditto on here to copy an opposing restricted or powerful Pokemon like Urshifu to allow for you to just, you know, flip the matchup on its head. And of course, Zamazenta. Also, I mean, you have to respect the Zamazenta, man. Substitute Iron Defense, Body Press, Behemoth Bash. Behemoth Bash is a cool tech. That's basically for the Heatran. A lot of Zamazenta recently have started running that over Heavy Slam because it's just a little bit more consistent damage into that mon since it's not dealing like a minimum anymore. But No Protect is really interesting, and I think you can get away with that since you have Pokemon like Screamtail supporting you, being able to like turn off that move that would have given you issues otherwise, and also just having the Ting Lu next to you, decreasing the special damage with the Vessel of Ruin. That is super interesting. And what else do we have here that I want to talk about? There were a few things that I found kind of interesting about this event in particular. There weren't any like super duper interesting teams. We did see another Lunala make a deep run, which it just goes to show that currently Lunala is just kind of up. And this is with Hisuian Gujar with Shelter Life, do Body Press, Heavy Slam. That's really cool, especially with Calm Mind Lunala. That's going to allow you to restore your Shadow Shield over and over again. So shout out to them. And what else do we have to talk about? I want to talk about like usage stats. Usage stats are the interesting thing here because, like I said, we're coming off of EUIC where Koraidon made a really, really impressive showing by winning the whole event. At day one, we actually had Koraidon have slightly more representation than Kyogre, and in day two, obviously it did get overtaken because while Koraidon is a strong restricted, it is definitely a skill check. You have to be a really, really good player to run that restricted, but you get a lot of value out of it. And yeah, in top 8, you know, there's like a single Lunala. Where is it? I'm trying to see something. I'm trying to like figure out my thoughts on Groudon, just kind of having like a colossal fall off in this event. Yeah, Groudon. I would say that like we can attribute Groudon dropping off mostly due to the fact that while it does still have like the positive matchup into Miraidon that gives it so much value, I think that it's overall sort of neutral matchup into Koraidon, and the fact that Koraidon value is just a little higher at the moment means that a lot of teams who would run like similar archetypes for Sun, you know, you see like your Fluttermane Chi-Yu, your Ogerpon Hearthflame, your Urshifu, next to like Koraidon and Groudon. Koraidon is just like a slightly better option at the moment, especially considering Groudon doesn't really like Terapagos that much. Turning off the Sun, just being able to pin you with a super effective hit, making you Terra, and then getting hit by Terra Starstorm. Koraidon has a lot easier matchup into that Pokemon. And yeah, as far as non-restricteds go, Iron Hands and Urshifu, Incineroar, Fluttermane, like we see like the same general cast of characters here. I think we're having a little bit of a rise in Farigiraf usage. I think people are just starting to see the value of that Pokemon, and that tends to happen as the format goes on. A lot of people really love being able to block priority, being able to helping hand Pokemon, and just being able to like have a soft trick room option. But yeah, this tournament overall was really interesting in Top Cut, but beyond that, it felt like a lot of more of the same in like day 2 and and in day 1. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Just wanted to give a brief rundown of the tournament, give a little shout out to Lunala finally winning its first event in like 3 years. If you enjoyed or if you have any thoughts, leave a like, comment down below what you think, and yeah, subscribe, whatever. I will see you guys in the next one.